Striking a balance between development and conservation has been a conundrum for invariably all governments. From time to time, there have been many regulations and measures related to these issues. The most recent one being the Supreme Court directive mandating every protected forest, national park, and wildlife sanctuary across the country to have an eco-sensitive zone of a minimum 1 kilometer starting from their demarcated boundaries. While environmentalists in general have welcomed the move, there has been a wide uproar in many parts of the country against the same, fearing it could possibly affect the lives of thousands of people and also sectors like tourism, agriculture, and industry. Now, the question is, can't human development and biodiversity conservation go hand in hand? To talk on this, we have with us Professor Madhav Gadgil, a renowned ecologist and academic, and founder of the Center for Ecological Sciences. He is a former member of the Scientific Advisory Council to the Prime Minister of India and the head of the Western Ghats Ecology Expert Panel of 2010, which is popularly known as the Gadgil Commission. Professor Gadgil, thank you for joining us. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Namaskaram, namaskaram.
As we are aware, there are protests happening in various parts of the country following the Supreme Court directive. As an ecologist, what is your take on this issue? What should the focus of protection be, and which is the appropriate agency to undertake protection?
Well, I think the order is a flawed order, as is the whole regime of nature conservation in the country. It is grounded in the notion that protected areas, the wildlife sanctuaries and national parks particularly, and reserve forests, they will protect the natural diversity, biological diversity, all the ecological habitat diversity of the country. And that the agency, the forest department in charge of this protection, is the right agency. I think both these are very flawed assumptions. Firstly, one must look at what is the most threatened of habitat, for instance, and elements of biodiversity in India. The worldwide trend also, and this is very much so in India, is that the most threatened habitat and the most threatened elements of biodiversity are freshwater ecosystems, the rivers, streams, the ponds, wetlands of the country. The open, arid region, scrub forests are next. The deciduous forests are much less in need of protection. They are much less threatened overall. And evergreen forests are perhaps a little more in need of protection, but again, not very much in need of protection. The whole protected area network, it has its origin in the hunting preserves of either the Maharajas or the Britishers, like the tea planters, who passed themselves as Maharajas. So you have the Aravikulam National Park, and so in Tamil Nadu you have the hunters, the tea planters, Mudumalai Wildlife Sanctuary. In Karnataka you have the Mysore Maharajas, Bandipur National Park. So these are all because they had these big animals which the Maharajas and the British planters loved to hunt, that these are the habitats that have become protected. Now, obviously, this is a very limited and improper choice. What we need to protect, as I said, certainly above all are sources of our rivers and streams, and of course the waters in the streams and rivers also. Our traditional systems had this vision, and clearly, for instance, this whole Shabarimala, which was regarded a sacred mountain, it has to do with the origin of the Pamba river, I think it is. And in Maharashtra, for example, you have the Bhima Shankar, which is at the origin of the Bhima river, which is a major tributary of Krishna. So we had these systems which were discarded by the British and by the protection regime that they brought in. We have to look at and seriously look at these systems and what are the real threats The real threats are a whole range of developments which are disrupting these water sources and the incredible pollution that is affecting the Indian rivers. One of the major wildlife species, one should take an example, is ghadial. This is the fresh water and fish eating crocodilian. And its population has declined from some 10,000 a few years ago to 250, I believe, today. The tiger population has in fact increased several folds probably. There are no good estimates available. But since there are so few ghadials, we have good estimates. And what is destroying the ghadials? It is not hunting by people, not at all. The cadmium, mercury, the awful poisoning of the Chambal River and other tributaries of Chambal, that is killing off the gharials. So we have to really take serious action against all this disruption of water sources, all the pollution which is affecting essentially every water body in the country. And we are completely ignoring this and talking only of a very limited and therefore an inappropriate regime of protection. Secondly, who has been protecting these? It is very well again clear that it is the local communities who are interested in protection. Most recently, there was this huge outcry about a railway line which is destroying large parts of Mollam National Park in Goa. And the forest department is supporting this destruction of a national park. Now, if this is an agency which is supposed to guard these national parks, how can it be party to actual conniving with the government and destroying this national park? But it is. Therefore, it is very clear it is a completely inappropriate agency, and there are plenty of detailed evidences which I have cited in our Western Ghat Ecology Expert Panel report. I am a scientist and go by objective evidence of the harassment and extortion of bribes by this forest department, including in the case of the Bhima Shankar Wildlife Sanctuary, the source of Bhima River, as I was mentioning, including in Mahabaleshwar, which is again a source of 5 major rivers, all tributaries of Krishna, and which was traditionally protected again as a large sacred ground, Kshetra Mahabaleshwar, which has been discarded. And in fact, in Mahabaleshwar, instead, a bureaucratic, ecologically sensitive area has been constituted, and the bureaucracy has been extorting bribes from local people. They have given me a letter stating the extent of the bribing. So I said that I cannot make such allegations without your giving me in writing. They gave in writing. This is all quoted in our panel report. So both the focus and then the agency are inappropriate in this case of this order. Furthermore, it is absolutely impractical. Now, Sanjay Gandhi National Park or Borivali National Park in Mumbai is a major national park. It's a hilly tract just on the border of Mumbai. And that is where you have this Mithi River, which is a major river of Mumbai, its source. There was a government proposal to destroy the further course of Mithi River in the popularly known as Aribel colony area of Mumbai. And it was the people of Mumbai who protested and tried to stop that destruction of the Mithi River. And that is next to Sanjay Gandhi National Park. Large areas of Mumbai lie next to Sanjay Gandhi National Park. And 1 kilometer, within 1 kilometer are thick populated areas. And how are you going going to implement any kind of these, whatever the buffer or protected will mean. Again, in Western Ghat Ecology Panel report, I have given in detail the kind of ridiculous restrictions imposed in this buffer zone. In Kolhapur area, for example, there was this order saying that there shall be no artificial light in the buffer zone. What do you mean no artificial light? In Mumbai, where part of IIT campus is next part within 1 kilometer of the Sanjay Gandhi National Park, no artificial light. So IIT campus must completely be immersed in darkness as soon as sun sets, and there shall be no activity over the whole night period in IIT. I mean, this is the kind of absurdity that is being perpetrated, and unfortunately, the unthinking and anti-people urban conservationist lobbies support such unthinking restrictions, and regretfully, the judiciary also comes from this same urban nature conservationist class, which really has no idea of the realities and doesn't wish to think of realities. This is the problem. So, as I said, I certainly think it's an extremely ill-advised decision of the Supreme Court.
Okay, not just the general public, even a section of environmentalists and policy activists too have criticized the order, saying it does not address topographical features and that the ecosensitive zones should be considered on a case-to-case basis. Also, such zones should be declared through participatory planning exercises. In your opinion, do you think such participation ever happens in the Indian context?
Yes, I mean, okay, let me take up both these issues. Firstly, case by case relating to topography and other local context is certainly important. And the Western Ghat Ecology Expert Panel, in fact, assigned levels of sensitivity, not just yes or no, but actual quantitative levels of sensitivity to the extent it was possible for us based on all available data. Topography, elevation, rainfall, and then in terms of natural habitats, the extent of natural habitats such as natural forest cover, but also not just natural forest cover, because if you will see Araviculum, the natural cover also includes sholas and grasslands at the high altitude and so on. So natural vegetation and also you have databases of important bird areas, whether that particular portion is part of an important bird area, whether what is the number of threatened mammals which have been listed, which are present in that area. So there were these series of criteria, endemic species and so on. So the Western Ghat Ecology Expert Panel did its best to put together as much as possible of all this data. We had only a year and a half to work, and we had serious difficulties in accessing data from the government, although this was an official panel. The Wildlife Institute of India, for example, refused to give us its protected area database. I don't know what they are worried about. In any case, and the Goa government had a very detailed database prepared as part of its Goa Regional Plan 2021 exercise. They refused to give us that. The Pollution Control Board had prepared this zoning atlas for siting of industries, giving details of existing pollution levels. They refused to give us this data. So by just obfuscating, you try not to get anything done, but we still managed to do plenty. And we have given these ecological sensitivity levels. We thought that it would be best to assign them by square kilometers, roughly 100 kilometer basis, or taluk level. And since administratively taluks are well-recognized entities, we have provided taluk by taluk indices of ecological sensitivity. And that is the kind of exercise we should do. And where there are regions of high sensitivity, they should be protected. We have given some suggestions, and you will notice that the Kerala's disaster, the Puttuvara and the Pettibudi and the recent Kuttikal, I believe, those landslides have all occurred because of improper development in ecologically highest sensitive areas as classified by Western Ghat panel. Coming to the participatory, Kerala has the proud record that yes, it has made brave attempts at developing such participatory models of protection coupled to development. As early as 1991, I think it is village Kaliyasseri in Kerala, for which such a plan was prepared. And that plan was the model on which 95-96 a people's planning campaign was undertaken in Kerala. And I have a lot of friends from Kerala, and I have been working with them since 1980s. And I participated also in particular this people's planning campaign exercise. It was very inspiring exercise. And for every Gram Panchayat and Nagar Palika and so on, local bodies, such environment development plans were prepared. So this can be done, and this should be done. This is not being allowed by certain Western economic interests, but this is the way forward.
Okay. The whole discussion is now regarding, as you said, ecological sensitivity. So ideally, how should ecological sensitivity be defined? I mean, what are the parameters to be considered on a general note, sir?
There is a standard, in the sense, a document prepared by Government of India in 2000, a committee, Prof. Sen committee, which has spelled out a series of parameters relating to ecological sensitivity. And we were asked, part of our mandate was to consider these parameters, which we did. And then, depending on the availability of data, we selected some of them. Others we could not, because data was not available. But these were, as I mentioned, elevation, slope, rainfall in terms of habitat, whether it's a source of any kind of river, stream, and then extent of natural vegetation present, then important bird areas, whether it coincides with them, number of threatened mammals harbored in that area, and so on. As I said, there is both a scientific paper we published for public discussion in Current Science in 2010, and then there is an appendix in the Western Ghat Ecology Expert Panel report providing details of the database that we had created for assigning ecological sensitivity levels. And I must mention that these are today also in public domain. Now, government regretfully has taken off the Western Ghat Ecology Expert Panel report from the website of the Ministry of Environment and Forests. But that does not affect people, because it has been made elsewhere on the internet in several places. You can get it. You can go to Wikipedia article on this panel, and you can get the report. So it is available. Our this database, which we had carefully prepared, including use of very extensive satellite information, that has been also made available. There is a public domain site in which that data is available. So all this is publicly available. Regretfully, the various attempts at sabotaging all that we had done included the Kasturi Rangan report, they made a number of actually completely mischievous false accusations against what we had done. But they never made their database available. Ours is available. People can look at it. They can examine it and look whether those accusations have meaning. Kasturi Rangan, the committee's database is a secret database. People cannot verify what they had done. So this is unfortunate. But as I said, today is a age of openness and open availability of information, and whatever we have come up with is openly available, and I will go on making further such things available in future also as much as possible.
Okay, sir. You mentioned how the local communities get harassed by the authorities often. You quoted a few examples also. What exactly is the role that such communities must play in conservation-related decisions in biodiversity hotspots?
There are actually official framework of the country's constitution, which says people are sovereign, but in more detail, acts like the Biological Diversity Act, Original Act, provides a proper framework for documenting and suggesting proper measures for biodiversity conservation. Specifically, one should look at this Kuttikal in Kottayam district, which was the site of recent disaster. A panchayat, Kadalad, I think its name was, only 20 kilometers away from Kuttikal, and prepared its own biodiversity register as per Biological Diversity Act. They had documented the adverse impacts of quarrying on the hill above on biodiversity and its habitat, and based on that document, Kerala High Court had given an order to stop quarrying. But this was then set aside. There were all sorts of vested interests which rushed in and forced that panchayat to withdraw and so on. But this is the way it can be done and should be done. And proper implementation of the original Biological Diversity Act provides a very good tool. It is available to every panchayat, every Nagarpalika, Mahanagarpalika throughout the country to document and come up with. It is the committees are supposed to be at the local level biodiversity management committees. So it provides a framework for suggesting for local communities to suggest how to manage the biodiversity. And as I said, biodiversity includes its habitat.
There has always been this question, where do you draw the line between conservation and human development? Shouldn't there always be people-oriented approaches in biodiversity conservation? If I'm not wrong, your report on the Western Ghats made a pertinent statement. What we are seeing in the country is development by imposition as well as conservation by imposition.
Development by imposition is forcing rock quarries on villages which don't want them, clearly don't want them. Personally, I have been to some of them. Some years ago, a village called, a place called Chembanmudi. I forget the name of the village there, but Chembanmudi in Patnamthitta district, where there was this serious, and perhaps it has got worse problem. And the Geological Survey of India had given a report of the adverse impacts on the water regime, on agriculture, on the health of local people because of pollution, and the difficulties that the local student face because of the noise pollution. All this was on the record, but the government is forcing this so-called development on people, worse and worse. Fortunately, we have again open sources of data. There are many more rock quarries illegal in operation than what the government admits. This has come out in case of this Kuttikal landslide, that there are large number of quarries which are seen in the satellite imagery, which the government says don't exist on ground, but they eye in the sky can see them. So this is the position there. So this is development by imposition, and this conservation by imposition we are seeing. Where, for instance, all this wild pig menace. I mean, it is such a ridiculous notion that wild pigs, which breed prolifically and which are destroying crops and which are attacking and occasionally killing people, their lives are more important than human life. Because Indian Penal Code says that if there is a threat to your property or your person, you can kill a human being, but you cannot kill a wild pig. In this conservation by imposition regime, wild pig's life is more important than human life, and I don't agree. I mean, and it is not a question of wild pigs being in any sense threatened. Their population is exploding all over the country. There is abundant evidence of that. In Maharashtra, it has reached areas hundreds of kilometers away from forest areas and are destroying cultivation. It has nothing to do with any destruction or disturbance of forest habitat. They have just multiplied, and since they cannot be killed, they are just wandering all over the country and destroying agriculture, killing people from time to time. And there is every justification for killing them, and furthermore, every justification for people to kill, be permitted to hunt themselves and to consume the meat. Wild pig meat is very nutritious, and the government's own Family Health Survey data shows that India is a country, one of the worst countries in terms of levels of malnutrition in the world. When boasting of economic development, we should be ashamed that we have the proportion of malnourished people has remained constant 75 years after independence at around 40-41% still. And moreover, proportion who are anemic is actually increasing year by year, not just holding steady at some 42%, but increasing. Under the circumstances, this source of nutrition should be made available to people. And it is food for kings also, you know. In the Nepal kings, there is available, their menus served in Nepal king's court. And wild pig meat is a major component. It is a food for people and food for kings. And to deny India's malnourished peoples this food is, and say you must bury that damn pig, is ridiculous. I like wild pigs. I have no problems with them. I studied in Bandipur and I enjoyed watching elephants. I enjoyed watching tigers and panthers and sloth bears and wild pigs. But if now they get out, there are too many of them, and then they are causing a serious problem, then they have to be dealt with. And finally, let me specifically mention, no other country has this kind of anti-hunting regulations. And Sweden says that wildlife is a renewable resource. Their numbers will go on increasing. You must harvest them. And Sweden has abundance of wildlife, including moose. I have myself eaten moose kebabs with my friends there. And outside their houses, moose are still roaming because with proper regulation, they are hunted, and they should be hunted. And in Sweden, they declare that meat consumption, wild meat consumption is part of our culture. And with proper restraint, we will manage it. And they are managing it. They are a country on top in environmental performance index. And by the way, recently, there is some report, you may check, India is a country at the bottom in world's environmental performance. So the country at the top in environmental performance has this rational approach, and country at the bottom has this completely irrational and unjust approach. We must really get out of this.
Coming to the numerous development projects that are being implemented in the country and the ones that are in the pipeline, what is your take on such ambitious projects? For example, the Kerala project of the government of Kerala.
As far as I can understand, this project will certainly disturbs seriously many natural habitats, including wetlands. Moreover, its execution will require a lot of rock and metal and man-made sand, and it will further create demand for rock quarries and their produce. So I think in every way it is undesirable. I just don't see what we are gaining out of people zooming across the country at greater and greater speeds. It is leading to nothing positive because our economic problems. One need not get into details, but again, economy, if we look at, India is the country with amongst the worst negative balance of payments. We are not producing anything really sufficient to sell on the world market, and we are importing a lot. So there are only some 2 other countries in the world which have more negative balance of payment. India has a huge negative balance of payment, and all we are doing is again and again getting foreign capital to make up. And that foreign capital doesn't keep free. They make us enslave us. Sri Lanka has become a slave to China's investment of capital, and we are seeing it. So we have to really seriously think of all these issues.
Okay, sir. Finally, is there any recent development in the field of environment which makes you hopeful about future?
Yes, environment, I mean broadly in terms of the opening up of knowledge, opening up of communication. Let me take one concrete example. When you come to these biodiversity management committees, the authorities always say, oh, these ignorant villagers, they cannot, they don't know the identity, don't know the scientific names of the biodiversity elements. How can they prepare these biodiversity registers? Well, now you have an app photo and Google Lens, and my own friends who are 10th standard failed boys in Gadchiroli district, they are Adivasi gold boys. They are now shooting pictures with their mobile phones are everywhere, with their mobile phones of the local biodiversity elements, and through this Google Lens app are getting the correct scientific names. I have verified it again and again. So this barrier of education, which should really not have been there all these years after independence, but anyway, that barrier is being overcome regardless of the poor education that the country is providing them. So, and now we are having this Zoom meeting. I know I have these colleagues amongst many Adivasi groups throughout Maharashtra, and they are in some relatively remote villages. Some of them are regretfully affected by Naxalite menace. But even from those villages and such places all over Maharashtra, I am talking to them through these Zoom meetings, and they are sharing each other's experiences, problems, and trying to go ahead. So there is, in the modern knowledge age, tremendous hope of progress.
Okay, sir. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for your valuable words too.
You are most welcome. Thank you very much.